Welcome to Philly Fortune Talks with your host, Jake Penny, where the city's brightest minds share the secrets behind their success. Are you ready to be inspired?
Curious about mastering real estate investment and entrepreneurship? Today, we dive into the expertise of Adam Balsinger, a seasoned real estate investor with over 11 years of diversified experience. From fix and flips to wholesaling to multifamily syndication and short-term rentals, Adam has explored various investment avenues to achieve financial freedom. Adam serves as the investor relationship manager of the Investor Boardroom, where he builds relationships with accredited and sophisticated investors and leads the company's capital raising efforts. He is also a partner in wholesaling business in Philadelphia and has recently been featured in the top 100 people in Real Estate Magazine for 2021. Adam, welcome to Philly Fortune Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure catching up. So, you've had an extensive career in real estate and still do, spanning over a decade. Can you share what initially motivated you to pursue real estate investing?
Yeah. It wasn't reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, like probably 97% of your guests say, right? So dude, I moved around a lot after college. My first experience as an entrepreneur was running a door-to-door sales business and a B2B sales business. Cold calling, straight commission. It was brutal. Impulse sales. I started in Philly right after college, and that business moved me to New York and then Detroit and then Chicago. And so I'd lived in a lot of areas, man, and I'd rented a lot of different places, and, paying a lot of money out to landlords over the years, you feel like the wheels start to kind of turn. And I wound up actually, one of the last places I rented when I was living in Chicago was a quad that supposedly the landlord had purchased from like a little old lady that had been living there by herself. And he converted it into 4 apartment units. And my unit, the rent was like $2,200 a month. Dude, this is going back to like 2012, 2013.
Oh, shit.
So, and my unit was on the I was the downstairs unit. So the upstairs units, the 2 were renting for like 24. So homeboy was making like $9,000 on that quad. And I just things were starting to kind of fall apart in my business. I think for anybody that is a listener in your podcast, if you haven't started a business yet and you want to, hurry up and do it, because your first one's probably going to end in a heaping, smoldering, mess of a pile of just ash and fire and shit, right? So it fell apart after a while. And so I'm trying to kind of lick my wounds, but also figure out my next path and my next move forward. And so I took my landlord out to lunch and just was peppering him with questions. And that was really the start of it, man. And then, watching a ton of HGTV, and then I moved back to Philly, and I was driving around a lot, spending a lot of time in my car because I moved back in with my parents. I'm from Pottstown originally, in Montgomery County. So anytime I went into the city, man, it was like an hour and a half commute. And I went into the city all the time because there's nothing to do in Pottstown, or work, right? So I was spending a lot of time in the car, and I heard a bunch of the real estate pitches on the radio, come learn how to flip houses. And so I went to one, and I bought the friggin', $30,000 bus tour, whatever, to learn how to flip houses. And that was really my entrance into real estate.
Yeah, I went to one of those seminars as well.
Yeah.
My only thing is that they were giving away a free what is it? I don't even know what they're called anymore. AirPod or iPod. Yeah.
Okay.
They were giving away a free iPod. And then that was a free event, and then they sold you a 3-day event, and then they sold you the 30-day package, right? And it was so funny when
Yeah,
that
dude, in the
happened.
first one, you learn literally nothing. Like they're
Yeah.
just throwing around terms a lot, right? And telling stories. And so like, oh, come to the 3-day event for 1,500 or 3 grand or
Yup.
whatever, and you're gonna learn everything. And then you go to that, and it's really just more fluff.
2 days of pitching.
Dude, yeah, yeah. In a freezing cold room, like there's actually like science behind that. There's a reason that when you go into those pitch fest type of events that the room is cold. Like it's systematic, just like everything that we do, right? Like
Right.
people that run businesses, they know like what gets people buying.
Oh
So
yeah.
interesting because I know some people in the education space.
Yep. Yep. So, your experience in various types of real estate investments, you have a bunch of it, right? From wholesaling to fix and flip into syndication. What led you to focus on your current preferred investment vehicle?
So, I think, man, most of us, or I might be wrong, maybe I'm the only one, but, I like the reason I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and then, later real estate is because I like the idea of freedom. I don't like the idea of people telling me what to do. I want to be able to wake up and like do what I want, right? If that's work all day, awesome. If it's work half the day and F off the rest of the day, cool, right? Like I want that ultimate freedom. And so I viewed real estate as something that could provide me not just financial freedom, but freedom of time and location freedom that I could be anywhere. Right. So, like, dude, I don't even live in Philly anymore. We talked about this before you booked me on the podcast. Like, that's where I started my real estate career. And I've got a small portfolio of Burr deals that I did, small apartments in Philly, but I live in the Carolinas now. Freedom of location, right? Like I can invest in Philly from friggin' Timbuktu if I wanted to. But so, dude, like what I experienced was that while I was making some decent money in some of these different strategies, fix and flip, wholesale, syndication, I felt like I was going to have to build a massive team and do like very high volume in order to live the lifestyle that I wanted to. And I've kind of gone back and forth, man, over the years on like how much I really want that life. Right.
Mhm.
The idea of like, let's take syndication, for example. That is essentially a way for people to be able to buy commercial real estate. It doesn't have to be commercial real estate. You can syndicate anything. But essentially, it's a way to acquire an asset with little or none of your own money. So it was basically, how I was buying fix and flips with no money out of my own pocket, raising everything. I took that same concept and applied it to commercial multifamily. The smallest deal we ever did was 48 units. The biggest we ever did was 137. The 48 unit was like a $2.5 million purchase. The 137 was a $16.9 million purchase. And I have a 7-figure net worth now through real estate, which I didn't when I first got started. But dude, like, I'm not funding that deal myself.
Right.
So syndication allows you to essentially bring on a whole bunch of people and pool those collective resources in order to take down bigger deals. And so that sounds really awesome, right? Like, okay, I can syndicate some deals. I get like 1,000 doors that I'm operating, that I control as a part owner. And, that in theory should spit off enough cash that I've got time freedom and financial freedom and freedom of location. But dude, it doesn't always work out the way that you draw it up on the board, right? And so getting into the space and then being in it, I was going to need a lot more than the 1,000 doors. We at our height, we had, I believe it was 889 doors. And it was really not generating that much income for me when you really factored in like the amount of time and effort and headache and migraine and everything, right, that you got to deal with to do these kinds of deals. Our investors made great money on their returns, but because of some limitations that we had being newer in the space, limitations on ability to raise significant chunks of capital, like it takes time to build all that stuff out. And so, it was just like you could kind of see a path or like a light at the end of the tunnel, but like how long was that tunnel going to be? What was the income and earning potential I was going to have as I was in that tunnel, right? Working my way out. And so, I just started to look at things a little bit differently. I think a lot of us, we get started and we're like, more doors, more doors, more doors, more doors, more volume solves everything. But that's not the case. Like, it's not always the case. It can be, but it isn't always. And so there were a couple ideas, man, that I had heard in like 2020, 2021, 2022. When I was at that point several years into syndication, I was kind of looking around like, the way that this is going, I don't really like, I feel like we have to pivot a little bit, right? There was a ton of competition coming into the space. Prices were getting really high. In 22, you start talking about interest rates starting to climb, right? And so the convergence of a lot of factors, sometimes makes you reevaluate your strategies.
Right.
For me anyway, right? So, man, I heard like the idea, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but in the gold rush, the vast majority of people that made it in the gold rush were not the miners.
They were the ones selling the picks.
Selling the picks and selling the axes, right? So that was one thing that stuck, man. And then another thing was, instead of being focused on volume, focus on better performance. Less volume, much better performing, right? So those two things, man, just have been like stuck in my head for a while. And so I know several people that are like really successful in short-term rentals. I sold some stuff that I owned in Reading, Pennsylvania. Dude, when I was buying in Reading, Pennsylvania, I was buying small apartments and we were buying them for 20, 30, 40K a door. Like we were stealing these friggin' things. You can't buy a house, I don't think, in Reading right now for less than like $150.
Yeah.
But we got out at a really good time. I had a partner who was essentially the money on these couple Reading deals, but we were all in on two small apartments in Reading that we bought in 2014 for 92 grand. And we exited at the end of last year, 2023, for almost 4.
Wow.
And so we 1031 that money into, I was really starting to get interested in the short-term rental space at that time. So I wound up buying 12 acres down here in the North Carolina mountains. Think of like the Poconos up outside Philly. Ton of winter sports, ton of spring and summer activities, alpine trails, aerial obstacle courses, rope swings, like zip lines, you name it. And then the fall foliage. So I bought 12 acres there with my partner, and we're going to develop it into either like a tiny home short-term rental community or maybe like a glamping community, something like that. We're kind of like at an impasse right now because there's a road expansion happening that is like right next to our property, and the city's actually going to buy some of the land from us. We knew this going in, so we knew that there was going to be a bit of a delay or a lull before we could take action, but we also were able to get a pretty good price on the land because of the fact that there was this kind of like impending thing coming. And so, I got that on the back burner right now. And then I'm working a short-term rental deal right now. It's up in the same area. It's about 10 to 15 minutes from my land, my 12 acres. It's in an area called Seven Devils, North Carolina. It's 2 homes on 3 acres. And we're picking them up for like $765 in an area where homes are generally selling at 600 plus. So we got 2 homes for a little over the price of one, kind of, it'll take a little bit of work. But we close on that in July. And so, dude, talking to the thing that really, really, really got me like, okay, short-term rentals is the way to go, was breaking down a per door basis, like what kind of cash flow and income potential people that I literally know right now in short-term rental, either they own them, they arbitrage them, like whatever. They make so much more on a per door basis than like a traditional rental that I felt like I'd be an idiot not to pursue that and to go down that path. So, what Bigger Pockets tells us, if you're doing a BRRRR deal, that $500 to $200 a door after all expenses paid is a good deal, right? Dude, I know people with short-term rentals making $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 plus dollars per door profit.
Right.
So, like, do you want to buy 30 of your shitty little BRRRRs in the ghetto, right? Like in the city, because let's be honest, that's where they make money. Or would you rather buy 1 or 2? Seems like a pretty easy decision. You know what I'm saying? There's obviously challenges and things that are different in the short-term rental space and in the traditional long-term rental space. But that's good, because most of the people that are in short-term rental right now, probably 70% of them are mom and pop.
Right.
Like, they don't run it like a business. Like, I'm going to fucking crush those people, dude. Like, are you kidding? With the knowledge that you and I have now with marketing and hospital, like, it's so easy to kind of look at the industry as a whole and be like, okay, weakness, weakness, weakness. I can do better here. I can do better here. I can, yep. Okay, let's go. So that's where we're at, man. I
I'm
don't
totally with you there.
I would prefer 10 short-term rentals that I can use periodically when I want to, than I would prefer 1,000 doors.
Yeah, and I think like social media and the gurus out there that have sold the programs and are selling the programs, they stress on, oh, how many doors you have, how many doors you have, how many doors you have. And there's some guy on stage preaching, oh, I have 4,000 doors, I have 1,000 doors. It's like, yeah, dude, like that's cool. That's an accomplishment. You had to raise a ton of capital, build a ton of relationships, have a big team. But how much are you making off those doors? What are you making, $25 off those doors? On a grand scale of 4,000 doors, yeah, that's good money. However, for the person that's just getting started and is building their brand, and it's much harder to compete against the bigger, guys, the bigger players, it's like, man, how many doors do you really need to be financially free? And they don't really talk about that.
Well, and there's a whole other side of this too, Jake. If you're acquiring that many doors in a shorter period of time, how many of those are really good deals
Right.
versus something that you manage to like push across the table because you're trying to close volume, right? And so, dude, I got bamboozled, and a couple of my investors wound up getting bamboozled too. And like, bamboozled isn't the right word really, but I had primarily always, Jake, brought my investors into my own deals. And there was a period of time where I had the idea of like, okay, like, I'm limited to a certain extent on deal volume, right? If they're all mine. Like, if I can find some other good quality operators that I know, like, and trust, and that seem like they're doing a good job and have a good track record and blah, 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 then I can raise for them too. And then that would be a way for us to help our investors place more of their capital more consistently, but then also be involved in more deals and make more money as a business, right? Well, dude, so we wound up investing in a deal in Nashville, Tennessee, as a like very small minority partner. It was like a 200 plus unit, like class A property in Nashville, like beautiful property. They might lose the property.
Wow.
We're hoping that they don't, but there's really not a lot of communication right now that we're getting from the lead operator, and they're in trouble, man. Like, they had 20,000, 30,000 units. And so I'm sitting there like, looking at everything, and we do our due diligence, of course, but here's somebody with 20, 30,000 units. They might lose everything. And then think about how many investors are going to wind up standing out in the cold, losing all their money because of that. And so, like, that's a whole other thing, man, that I don't think enough people really talk about. Like this whole, like, oh, use OPM, use OPM, use OPM. Like, it's other people's money. Like, we need to be very, very cautious about that and tread very carefully. At least
Yeah.
I think we should be doing.
You got to respect it more than your own money.
Dude, totally. And so there's a whole element out there of like, are people being too cavalier because it's not their money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's scary. I've never felt comfortable investing, my investors' money in other people's deals. It's always been pushed upon, in these certain groups and whatnot. And you're like, hey, like, why don't you bring your investors on board? And I'm like, nah, no, we're all locked up over here. Everything's in play. Just never felt comfortable because at the end of the day, they're not me. They're not going to do what I do, or they're not going to take full responsibility for my investors' capital that spent years and years building relationships with. And at the end of the day, I'm not in full control. So it's like, if push comes to shove and shit happens, like, I can't really help. I'm not the main operator.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, that's a no-go for me.
I know, man. We're living through it right now. And it's like, logically, right? Okay, here's an operation or an outfit that has been doing this for 15 years. They've been through the '08 downturn and we're fine. And they have 30,000 units. Like, if you're hearing that, you could envision a reality where that operator is a better operator than the person that's been doing it for 4 years that has 800 doors, right? So, but you never know, right? Until you get in and until you do it. So, lesson learned there.
Yeah, for sure. As the investor relationships manager at Investor Boardroom, what qualities do you prioritize when building relationships with, accredited investors and non-accredited investors, like sophisticated, individuals?
Yeah, what do you mean by that question?
So, you know, when you build relationships with these individuals, when you're raising capital, um, you know, what is your strategy to go about it? What do you prioritize when building those relationships with those individuals, um, to provide as much value to that person, to make them see the grander vision, the grander purpose of investing in, syndications at the time? Maybe it's short-term rentals now.
Yeah, I think that it really all kind of comes down to, what is it that they're really looking for? I'm a huge believer in being like 100% your authentic self. Um, for those of you that can't see, I'm in a wife beater and a t-shirt and a baseball hat because like that's just kind of how I roll. Like, dude, I showed up to the multifamily real estate meetings that I run, that I used to run in Charlotte. I'm kind of put those on the back burner for the time being. But dude, I would roll in like warm-up pants and a t-shirt and a pair of sneakers, because that's who I am. Right. And so I never wanted to try to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't in order to attract investors. I generally swear more than I have sweared on your show. I also have 2 young kids, so I'm trying to swear less. But when I'm on phone calls and conversations with investors and I'm doing things that are going to be seen publicly, like I swear, because that's how I roll. I'm not politically correct. I'm going to share my political opinion, whether it ruffles somebody's feathers or not. Like, I don't fucking care. You don't want to invest with me? Cool. Go invest with somebody else. Like, I'm not going to like tiptoe on eggshells and try to portray myself in a way that I am not to try to get your capital. Right. So I think along with that, being really direct with what you're looking to do, and trying to find people who want to come along for the ride. They like the asset class and the investments that you're doing. I think it's less about like raising capital, man, I think is less about like convincing somebody than it is about finding the people that are already on your wavelength that just haven't found you yet.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
yeah. They're
Um,
always searching for someone like you, but they just haven't found it.
right, right. So, when we were doing, and I've scaled back a ton on all of this because I foresaw in 22 when interest rates started to increase, I was expecting there to be a lull in volume as like pricing equilibriums, like seller buyer expectations, whatever kind of like figured out somewhere that deals could happen. So I anticipated deal volume slowing down. And dude, I've never been through a like significant market like change in the market, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't investing in '08. I didn't live through that. And so now I have a little more than when I first got started. So my risk tolerance is a little lower. And we were kind of in this weird, position. But dude, we used to do a ton of marketing and content because when your intent is to help people find you, you've got to be in a lot of different places, putting out content, talking about what it is that you're doing to allow that person to find you. And then, we were really, then it was more about like, okay, let's figure out as quickly as humanly possible what this person's real goals and motives are in real estate investing. Because if we can't help them fulfill that, then let's just cut ties and move on. We don't want to blow up their inbox. We don't want to waste our time or their time. So I don't know that really totally answered your question. But, we would look for things like, you and I were joking about time before we got on. So I am like insanely protective of my time. And so I am a firm believer that the way that you are in one area of your life is the way that you are in every area of
Mm-hmm.
your life. So indecision and tardiness were always things that I wanted to kind of get. Like I didn't want to deal with the investor that was tardy or, couldn't follow through on obligations. And I learned that through trial and error because Little John said 100% he was going to invest in this deal. Meanwhile, Little John's been late to every single call that I've ever had with him. He missed this call. He didn't follow through on this one thing, but he's in the deal, right? Well, he was never in the deal. He just told me he was in the deal. And then so you're counting on that money because I'm in, right? And then that money never comes. And then that puts you in a precarious position later when you figure out that Little John's actually not coming through with any cash. And so you're better off eliminating that person, get that person out of your pipeline because they're never going to invest anyway. And if they do, it's going to be a pain in the ass because you're always going to be chasing them around after all. So like, let somebody else deal with that.
Yeah, yeah. I had an individual that's been booking the podcast for weeks now, and this person literally down to like the 5 minute before the call, they reschedule. And I reached out to my coach. It's like, what do I do with this guy? Like, I don't want to cut him off or anything. He was like, dude, cut him off.
Cut them off.
Cut him off. He's disrespecting your time.
It
So
ain't that important to him, or he would have followed through, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I'm totally with that. You deal with the, it's like bad deals that, that happen. It's like, yeah, it's tuition to the market, but look at it this way. You just paid for that person to be out of your life forever. You'll never have to deal with them again. And
Bingo.
they don't fit the greater purpose of, what you're trying to do.
Yep. Yep. And it's a valuable learning lesson too. So not only do you get them out, but you learn a lot from the experience.
Hopefully you learn a lot, right?
True. True. I think it was Hermosi that was talking about, the measure of intelligence is how quickly you learn from mistakes. And I
Mm.
always thought I was pretty smart, but I make a lot of mistakes like multiple times. So now I'm like, shit, okay, I gotta be better at that.
So how do you approach, and what's your thoughts on, having the importance of having multiple income streams?
I think there's a time and a place for it. I think when you're new at something, you suck at it. and that, if you believe in the 10,000 hour to mastery concept and you have 7 side hustles, like you're never going to get one of those side hustles to become a main hustle because you're dividing your time too much. So I think the real answer to that question, man, it would be that it depends on where somebody's at and it depends on where they're coming from. And this is one of my beefs, man, with a lot of these like generic coaching programs, is that they're assuming everybody's coming from the same place, and almost no one ever is. We all have differences. We all have different backgrounds and, scenarios and whatever, and access to capital and you name it. Right. So like, I actually very much regret having the syndication and the wholesale operations running at the same time, because I was shooting myself in the foot and kind of putting a cap on what I could do with each one at that moment, because I was dividing my time and my attention. Had I focused on one, gotten it set, gotten it systemized, and put the people in place to run those systems for me, and then tested it for a quarter or two to make sure that everybody was in the right place and I didn't need to fire anybody and replace them, whatever, right? Before, and then go into the second thing. That's what I should have done, and I didn't. And so another important lesson to learn, right? And so now, we have the ability to kind of dabble in something over here and over here while we're still kind of doing the core thing. But I'm not in 7 places at once. Right. So I think that like the ultimate plan and goal for me is that I do not have to trade my time for money at all if I do not want to, that I have assets sprinkled all over the place that are generating income and cash flow for me. And so I envision living my life and paying all of my expenses and my lifestyle from multiple streams of income, but you can't start there.
Right.
Like,
No,
you got to start with 1 first, and then from 1 goes 2, and then 2 goes 3, right? Like I used to meet so many people, man, when I was running my meetup, they were like, oh, I've got 6 side hustles. And I'd be like, oh my God, like, I know you said that, like, and you think it's good, but
it's
it
good.
is
Yeah.
so backwards that like, you don't even know how backwards it is.
Well, I think the problem is for so long, all these gurus and gurus would always talk about, oh, the average millionaire has 7 income streams. Oh, da, 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 da. And it's like, what they never said was like, yeah, they have 7 income streams, but they started with 1 and then they mastered it. And then they did it to where they can remove themselves and it still runs proficiently. Then they started on the second one. Then they did the same thing to that one. And it's like, yeah, I'm a prime example of that. It's like, yeah, I was that guy. Oh man, I got 6 side hustles or whatever it was when I got started in real estate. And it was so detrimental. Like looking back, it was like, dude, if I just focused on the one thing, I'd be so much further. And it was crazy though. Once I like cut out all those things and focused just on real estate, dude, my portfolio parabolic. It was just like, holy shit, this is what it's actually like. My God.
Yeah, dude, it's funny because like you don't really like there's no finish line or like, celebration like, congratulations. You have enough now that
You win a
like this is gonna
prize.
be fun. Cause at first, man, like I just remember being like, oh my, so many deals of just like you're trying to scrape and claw and scrape and claw. And then like you pick your head up a couple years later and you're like, oh, I've got an extra, however much sitting in the bank that I can go and deploy into something. I wonder if any of my friends have a cool deal that I can get involved in. Like my wife and I invest in other people's syndications pretty frequently. Like I'm doing passive investing and private lending occasionally here and there now with people that I know, like, and trust. And so, dude, but it gets really fun, man. Like when it's to the point where you've got money coming in and your net worth is increasing and you can borrow more money, and like, dude, it just opens up so many doors. It really does get to be pretty neat.
I bet. I recently had, well, it wasn't recent. It was probably about 2 years, probably 3 years ago. Yeah, it was like 2020, so going on 4. Um, there was this thing in Philadelphia that was going around that all the real estate guys were investing in. It was a Bitcoin mining company.
Oh boy.
And yeah, I invested like 200 grand into that thing. And what do you know? It wound up being a Ponzi scheme and I lost it all.
Like all those people that were buying those Amazon, built for you, Amazon drop shipping, Walmart
Oh yeah,
shipping,
I
like
made that mistake too back in like
35
2000.
grand a pop. I
Yeah.
remember looking at those, man, and they're like, oh, 30% return, you get your money back in 2 years. And then when your contract, and I was like, what happens when the contract's up? You're like, you're going to run the store for me for 2 years. And then what? Like, then what happens?
Right.
Oh, well, you just hire us again. Well, then,
Yeah, a
wait,
renewal
what do you
fee for the
mean?
same cost.
Right. How much does that cost? Well,
Yeah.
wait. So then I'm not really, and dude, now, like, I know so many people that bought those that are just like, I gave up. Like, I
Bag of
stopped
shit.
even paying attention
Yeah.
to it. It's not doing anything. But dude, it was all the rave. It was all the rave for a year,
Without a doubt.
probably.
Even some guys in the real estate industry were selling this shit,
Yeah,
you
no, I
know?
know. I'm
And
friends
I
with
was
several
like,
of them. I'm friends with several of them.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
the people that are always promoting something different, you got to be like,
I'm like, wait, I was just getting
what's
your
different
REO,
about
your
it?
REO properties in the Midwest, and
Yeah,
now
you
I'm
were just
getting
helping. You were just helping with the
turnkey.
with you weren't you just doing like currency trading, and then you
Yeah.
were helping small business owners with the ERC credit? Like, come on now, we
Yep,
know that you
yep.
ain't doing shit. Let's get out of here.
Whatever makes money on social media, they're all
Yeah,
about. So
yeah.
what's your long-term goals in real estate and how do you plan to achieve them?
Um,
I know you don't have your crystal ball. I don't have mine, but
so I am really right now, man. I am totally out on large multifamily. There are way too many big, deep pocket buyers out there that have cheaper access to capital than you and I do. They're
yeah.
too close to the money spigot, right? They're paying 2, 3, 4%. We're paying double. Um, so I still like small multifamily. I think there's a tremendous opportunity in small multifamily. You don't have the same amount of competition going after a 7-unit apartment that you do a single family house. So I will continue to gobble up small apartments. Right now, I'm only buying them in the Philadelphia area because I have a team there. And I've made the mistake of going into areas where I don't have a team before and regretting it after buying like 3 properties. Like, shit, what am I going to do with these now? So I'm going to keep buying in Philly where it makes sense. I'm not like, you know, a motivated buyer. I'm buying carefully and like
I'm right.
and right. Um, and then, man, I'm going to continue to do the short-term rental thing. I'm really excited about the 12 acres. I think that can really be, I mean, that can be a couple $100,000 a year type of business if we do it right. So there's a lot of time and effort that's going to go into that. Dude, I I hate the direction that our country is going. So I want to buy as much cash producing and income producing real estate as I possibly can. I want to buy a bunch of land and I want to fuck off out in the middle of nowhere and fence in my property and have a bunch of guns.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck away from me and my
I,
family.
I hear
That's
you.
where I'm at, man. Like, I want to grow my own food. I want to have my own live. Like, I need land. And we're probably, like, I'm talking to people locally about like possibly looking into doing a homestead. I never would have thought 3 years ago that I'd be saying this kind of stuff out loud. But dude, COVID and the world's crazy, and
Since then,
I
yeah,
don't
it's
trust anybody that has any power or
nope.
any authority. I've always been kind of anti-authoritarian, but it seems like we're going more and more in the direction of communism than we are in freedom, and so I'm concerned about that, man. My goals are less on the acquisition of more and more and more real estate as it is on ensuring my family's safety and our financial success moving forward. So I'm looking at I think that, like, and there's a lot of other people that are starting to kind of come to this conclusion, and there's people that have beaten me to it, which I'm upset about, but I want to it won't be long before I start buying some small businesses. I'm actually partnered up with a home construction company here doing some biz dev for them right now because I want to learn that business. I really want to buy a service based business like roofing,
Yep.
electric, plumber, HVAC. Grant Cardone just bought not long ago an HVAC company. I think that is the next frontier for your investors. I think that real estate is getting more and more crowded. I think it's going to continue to happen with more and more education and more gurus out there. So I think that a lot of us are going to have to get creative and figure out different strategies. And so I'm going to keep buying real estate when it makes sense, and I'm going to start buying businesses soon.
Yeah, I'm with that. The real estate is getting a lot more saturated, and mom and pop businesses are now, it's like the turn of the century. They don't have any money to pass them along. And, these things are making money if they're run properly. They're not run properly. So you're able to get them like super cheap. But
Yep.
I see, I'm the same thought process right now, have real estate really dialed in as much as I think I do, right? I mean, I always could be better.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, we have the crews, we have really, really affordable cost, and our quality is amazing comparatively, right? We always, there's always someone better.
Yep.
Like, okay, well, how can I parallel this since it's still in real estate and start offering this service? Okay, roofing, HVAC, like how do I build that out? Like my partner in life and business, her brother is going to plumbing school right now. And it's like finally, man, somebody's actually in the trades with me. My family aren't. And I'm like, all right, how can we start thinking, you get your master's plumber's license eventually, and then we start building crews and getting vans and start, this home service business. So yeah,
it's really exciting, man. It's, opportunities always change. And unless you're paying attention, it can be really easy to miss some of these opportunities. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the small mom and pop business. Like you said, man, their kids don't want to take over a plumbing company. Like,
no.
I got to deal with sewage.
Right. They're sweet.
But those businesses make a shitload of money.
Oh, yeah.
And dude, guess what? They don't have that much risk. They're selling the pickaxes and the shovels to the investor or to the homeowner, right? Like, it ain't no sweat off their back, whether it's a simple plumbing fix or if they got to redo the entire house, right? Like, it does not matter at all. So, there's a lot of synergy there for people like you and me. We can essentially flip ourselves the business, right? Which is always nice. But yeah, I love to hear that we're on a similar wavelength there, Jake.
And then also check out St. Lucia.
Okay.
So they offer the easiest citizenship that's recognized by 90 other countries. So you have instant visas in 90 other countries. And just in case, things, hit the fan,
They will.
citizenship.
Totally. I mean, dude,
It's not if it is will. And the rest of Americans that don't have that or didn't prepare, all their money will be seized in banks and they won't be able to touch anything. But if you have dual citizenship, you can quickly internationally wire that money out and you are floating good in paradise with your family and safe.
Hey, man, it sounds like you and I are on the same wavelength with some of your St. Lucia research that you've done.
Absolutely. We've been working on that for sure. But for the listeners that want to learn, more about you, I know you've pulled yourself away from syndication, but I know you still got a lot of great content out there. Where's the best place for them to go and learn more about that?
So I changed my IG handle not that long ago. So let me check. I don't even know what it is right now. But Instagram would definitely be it. I am literally just Adam Balsinger on Instagram. So pretty simple. The Adam Balsinger. So at the Adam Balsinger.
Awesome. Well, Adam, it was a pleasure having you on Philly Fortune Talks today.
Yeah, man. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to Philly Fortune Talks with Jake Penny. Inspired to share your success story? Visit phillyfortunetalks.com/guest and let's inspire together.